morning. We are having people join, but we're going to start right on time. We're going to have an on-time start and an on-time finish. So as we get started, just a couple of thank yous and introductions to begin. First of all, I'd like to thank all of our partners who made this event possible today. So here at NWPC, Greater Pasadena area, we are delighted to partner with women in the NAACP, with the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, the Eta Lambda mega chapter here in Pasadena. And of course, none of this would be possible without all of our representatives here from the Pasadena Unified School District. So thank you so much to everybody who's joining today, and thank you to everybody who's made this possible. You'll hear from all of our panelists and everybody in a moment, but I'd like to take a minute and just make a couple of very brief introductions, and then we'll dive right in. First, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, Michelle Richardson-Bailey. You'll know her as the District 3 representative on the Pasadena Unified School Board, and she'll be moderating our conversation. I'd also like to introduce the Vice Chair of the Program Committee for NWPC Greater Pasadena area, and that's Jocelyn Griffin. Both of these wonderful women made this whole operation today possible, so thank you so much to both of them. And so with that, I will hand it over to Michelle. And Michelle, please take it away.
Great, thank you so much, Katie. So good morning to all of you, and thank you for being here. I am honored to serve as the moderator for this event. But before I introduce our panelists this morning, I'd like to make you aware of a few housekeeping rules so that you know what to expect as we move through the program. So first, each presenter will have up to 5 minutes. To stay on task, there will be no questions until after the panel presentations. A Q&A will be up to 30 minutes after the presentations, and the chat will be open during the presentations. However, the panelists will not answer any questions until the Q&A portion of the program. We will control your mics during the entire program, and this is done as a courtesy to all. During the Q&A, you will be able to post questions in the chat. However, if you would like to ask a question personally, please use the raise hand function or use the chat to ask that we unmute your mic. During the Q&A, questions will come from the registration forms, the chat, and those of you who would like to ask your questions personally. So we will be taking questions from 3 platforms, and we'll alternate the questions between the platforms. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to PUSD's Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Elizabeth Blanco. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing our team to have an opportunity to, answer questions that may still be out there in our community. I just want to, each person on the panel will introduce themselves and tell you their role so we can keep the presentation flowing smoothly. So, Ms. Hill, would you like to project the presentation? And if we're not able to answer everyone's questions today, we will definitely return answers in writing, and you'll be able to receive them, as quickly as possible. So I wanted to just start out by correcting something that I understand was put in the media by in reverse order this weekend and then was corrected. But in terms of vaccinations, an estimated 96% of PUSD employees have been vaccinated already. 1,320 via the Pasadena clinic, which we had assistance from, the Pasadena city, and we were able to open a clinic very early when vaccinations became available. And then we have another 800 estimated vaccinations that were done at Huntington Hospital. So, we are gathering the information and we'll be asking, employees if they are willing to self-report and make sure that we increase these numbers. So it could even be higher than the numbers that we currently have. We're planning on conducting random testing The board approved the contract for this at our last board meeting. And right now we also have a voluntary program where any employee or student that wants to be tested before school starts can be tested at our clinic at our main district office. Once we get the attestation of our employees' vaccination status, and depending upon direction from our legislators, we will, the board will be able to determine if vaccinations will be mandatory or not. We recently attended a meeting at the Los Angeles County Office of Education, where the superintendent stated that, you know, it will take some legislation to mandate vaccinations for teachers. Now, there are various opinions out there about that, you know, statement. So we are investigating all of that. It will also take a negotiation with our labor partners. So there's many steps before we can mandate vaccinations for our employees, but I think everybody should feel safe since 96% of our employees are already vaccinated, and there could even be more. So students are going to be safe in the hands of our PUSD employees. We were among the first in the county to get vaccinated because we have a partnership with our city and we were able to open a clinic early. There are more than 80% of Pasadena residents who are also vaccinated. So we will continue to advocate and push for vaccination clinics for parents, students, and staff to be vaccinated. So, and we're also a front runner in the testing models. So I want everyone to be assured that their children are coming back to a safe environment. So we can go to the next slide. So we plan to open in person on August 12th. The board passed a resolution, and that the evidence and the science is showing us that in-person instruction can occur safely as long as we continue to encourage our children to physically distance. And even though there may be more children in the classroom than when we opened in the spring, there is still space to keep between them. We are going to employ universal masking that is in our COVID safety handbook, which is also on our website. So if there are concerns or questions, you can go to the website, and the handbook is updated each time we get new information from, you know, our own health department or the county health department. And I already mentioned about 80% of the residents being vaccinated. And we're starting up our vaccination clinics in early August. There is also a schedule and location of the vaccination clinics on the website. So we have been, you know, planning the entire summer, learning from our early adopters who came back to school early. And we are, you know, following all of the mitigation strategies that will prevent future outbreaks. So some of the key intervention strategies that we are putting in place is promoting vaccination, the consistent and correct use of masks, physical distancing and cohorting when possible, screening and testing, and then hand washing and having our you know, stations and all of the rules and procedures that we taught the children that have come back already. We will reinforce and teach with our new returning students. And then contact tracing. Whenever there is a case of COVID, I want to assure everybody we contact the health department. We have trained staff and teams at each school in the Johns Hopkins contact tracing. And each case is different because a lot depends on how long someone was exposed to the person, when they actually found out they had COVID. So sometimes, you know, I know rumors start about cases of COVID, and we just be assured we followed all the procedures and we work directly with Dr. Go on the next steps. So ventilation will be talked about, and cleaning and disinfection by Dr. Barnes when we come to her slides. And, you know, at this time, we will have limited in-person entry of visitors and volunteers to our schools. We know that this is very, hard for our partners because they want to be here and they want to help us. But at this time, at least for the launch in the beginning of our year, we really do need to limit our exposure to outside guests. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Hill.
All right, thank you, Dr. Blanco. Good morning, I'm Helen Chan Hill. I'm your Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. And everything that Dr. Blanco just described is precisely why the largest instructional setting that we are opening the school year with is in person. Not only has the state recognized, but many educators who have been in the classroom and parents as well, that in-person instruction really has a significant amount of benefits that we are really trying to prepare as much as we can to ensure the stability of that setting. We have a full reintegration plan that I'll speak on a little bit in the next slide to really make sure that we've taken care of not only the academic concerns, but the social emotional ones as well when students reintegrate into the schools in a full-time setting. But additionally, those health and safety protocols and key prevention strategies that you just saw Dr. Blanco mention are going to be very vigilantly monitored because we do understand that in order to have this best setting for our students, that we have to be extraordinarily careful and mindful of making sure that the environment stays safe so that the instruction and the learning can really be magnified in the way that it's meant to be. However, given that we know that there are other circumstances that exist in this time period, we do have these two other situations that we plan for that are on the left and to the right of our in-person block here. So the first that you may have heard a little bit about at our board meeting this past week is the independent study option. That's the other alternative that we are allowed to do in this particular climate to provide instruction to students. Our independent learning model is now extended to include TK all the way through 12th grade. It used to be just a secondary model. And we are providing daily synchronous learning for the younger students, I think actually through 7th grade. And then the weekly check-ins so that individual progress can be monitored. It is a unique setting, but it will attempt to replicate as much as possible the instruction that would be happening in person, but obviously in a virtual format and with some additional supports. If you're interested in independent study, an individual consultation is recommended, and a survey has already been put out on our website. On to the right, though, is the other assurance that we are providing for all families, which is our continuity of learning plan. So in the event that your student is attending in person and there is a situation where there is a quarantine needed, we are keeping some structures in place that will allow for smooth transition to a quarantine situation. So the first is that Pasadena Unified actually has a learning management system called Canvas, which many returning parents will be familiar with. We have always had a learning management system, but during the time of COVID, it became much more, consistent in its use. We're going to maintain that, that innovation and make sure that students are able to access assignments as well as learning and other resources from their computers, from their Chromebooks. And we are keeping our video conferencing systems in place so that teachers can still communicate with students should a class need to close down or any other kind of quarantine situation. So in planning for the return for all students, whether they are in any of those situations of in-person, which the majority of our families intend to be, or independent study if needed, or in a continuity of learning situation, we've really prioritized two significant features that are really called for in a lot of the research around coming back after a crisis. The first is academic. It's the platform that we're using, or I'm sorry, not the platform, the methodology that we're using is an approach with accelerated learning. And the second is social emotional supports that are needed as students have experienced varying levels of change and potential trauma during this time. So we're really mindful that in this time period, we really have to address the whole child. It's clearly something that would have been a priority in the past as well, but even more magnified now. So with our accelerated learning model, this is really an intention to understand that we've had some lost time and some unfinished learning. And so rather than stop the rate of progress that students have or remediate or begin from a step behind, we are really looking at our data systems to be able to holistically know where the child is and be able to communicate that to teachers. We've updated our curriculum to allow for time for students to receive some small group and individualized instruction. And teachers are working on essential standards that will ensure that students can move back into the grade level expectation or beyond in the time period that we have in the school year. On the social emotional side, we are actually launching a wellness studio for our employees and our students that is chock full of resources and instructional activities that are incorporated into the curriculum. Additionally, we have laid out for the first time ever a scope and sequence, which is essentially a year-long plan for social emotional themes and activities that can be implemented at the right time, so that it's not something that's just done at the start of the school year, but check-ins all the way throughout. And additionally, a robust mental health services for any students who are in greater need of some support in that area. With that, I'm going to pass it on to my colleague Stephanie Cozy to talk about our special populations.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Cozy. I'm a teacher on special assignment in the department that serves students with disabilities. And so I just want to talk a little bit about specifically about students with disabilities and returning to in-person learning. So students who receive special education services will continue to receive in-person services when they come back on campus. So all those services, specialized academic instruction, which is basically a teacher providing instruction, related services, which are those speech services, counseling, occupational therapy, physical therapy. Those services will continue to be provided in person. For those students who are unable to, or parents who are concerned about them returning in person, independent study is an option that is based on an IEP team decision. So in those cases, an IEP team will be called and those decisions will be made based on what the IEP team determines is the most appropriate and beneficial environment for the student to receive their services. And I'm going to now pass it on to.
It's me, Stephanie.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Christina Turley Payne. I'm the coordinator of College and Career Pathways. Our return to school is once again a focus on our graduate profile, which we've done throughout the pandemic. These skills, even though we knew students were possibly missing some of the content that they would normally get in person, we knew that these skills were important to our students. So this is something we asked teachers to focus on while they're doing at-home instruction. And now that we're returning to school, this is definitely a refocus on these skills. Our senior defense last year, you may or may not know because you didn't have a senior, but it was put on pause. However, we are resuming the senior defense this year. Students are in preparations for that. Again, we will be flexible with how we are asking students to perform. If we need to make adjustments, we are here to do that. We are definitely in the frame of setting students up for success, not for failure. We don't even say that students fail our senior defense, they just might have to resubmit. So this is not an opportunity for students to fail, but it is an opportunity for them to showcase what they've learned through their high school experience. So it may be an adjustment of the requirements, and it may be an adjustment of how they're able to turn in their artifacts. The requirements, if you don't know, for the senior defense are students have to show artifacts of research. They have to show an innovation or a creativity artifact, and they have to do a reflection paper. The only thing that happens in their senior year is that reflection paper and then the presentation. And some of you may have been on our presentation panels. If you have, thank you. If you haven't, please reach out. I would love for you to be on a panel. But the panels are where the students are able to showcase their artifacts and reflect on their time in high school. Although last year it was not a requirement for students, it was an opt-in option. I'm very happy to inform everyone that we had about 200 students opt into the senior defense. And, you know, we gave them a little pin since it was an opt-in option last year, but students should be ready for it this year. And in preparation for coming back to the school year, we had some bridging activities this summer. We had them last summer as well. It's a wonderful opportunity within our academy structure for students to spend a freshman week with their teachers and upperclassmen. So we were able to host summer bridges for 5 of our 8 academies this summer. They're introduced to project-based learning. There's a lot of social emotional learning that happens, and we actually use summer bridge leaders who are upperclassmen to run through SEL or social emotional learning activities with the incoming freshmen. It's a really great way for them to build a bond before they ever come to campus. And it's a way for them to acclimate a little bit to high school, even though some of them weren't physically able to be on campus. They're able to meet a lot of their teachers. A lot of the academy teachers will pop in and say hi. Again, they're able to meet upperclassmen during these sessions. So it was truly a way for us to start prepping for the new school year. We had a lot of students between their junior and high school year this summer who were able to participate in work-based learning experiences, most of which were internships. So we are super grateful to the community of Pasadena who still, whether it's virtual, a hybrid model, if they were able to offer some in-person activities, they offered our students 60 hours of internships from, you know, Caltech to our own ITS department. So we have a lot of wonderful partners who made that happen. And we had about 200 students placed. Through the city of Pasadena, we're able to offer a stipend for our students. So we're grateful to the city as well for that. You know, along with all of these activities, when we're talking about college and career readiness, we're also speaking about students earning dual enrollment credit. And we were able to offer some dual enrollment courses for the first time. We were able to offer Spanish, art, and career counseling to students who are part of the internship program. And as we head into the new year, this is a relationship and a conversation that's always ongoing. We offer many dual enrollment courses during the school day for PUSD students during the regular school year. So we know things are constantly in flux at PCC, and we are in constant communication with them to make it work for our students on our campus. And now I believe I'm handing it over to Dr. Trudell Skinner.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. As of 2 weeks ago, I am now the Senior Director of TK through 12 schools, yet I remain in constant contact with the enrollment office. And this chart displays the annual enrollment for the PUSD by grade level. You can find it on DataQuest from the California Department of Education. Enrollment is verified the first Wednesday of October for K through 12 schools. So these are the enrollment numbers for the years that are displayed. Current enrollment data is not verified or complete. However, as of Friday, our overall district enrollment showed 15,789 students, which is 72 students down from our overall enrollment of last year. However, students will continue to enroll and disenroll throughout up until the first Wednesday in October when our enrollment numbers are normalized.
Good morning. I'm Leslie Barnes, and I'm the Chief Finance and Operations Officer at the district. I wanted to talk a little bit about the COVID funds that we've been allocated for our school district through either the federal government or the state. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of money, some of which has already been spent or is obligated, because as we planned last year, we were preparing for a full in-person return. And so some of these funds have been spent in anticipation of this August return to in-person. Our first pot of money was we had received coronavirus relief funds for learning loss mitigation, and that had to be spent by May 31st of 2021. So those funds have been spent. There was another Proposition 98 funding source of 1.3 million to help with learning loss last year. And so those funds have also been spent. We have an in-person learning grant, which has been obligated in anticipation of our return. Those will need to be shown to be spent by August 31st of 22. And then our expanded learning opportunities grant, that's what you may know as ELO. And that we had some parent participation with that. We had a board presentation. And so that was a lot of what you had heard happened in the summertime, and then also what will happen next summer and throughout the school year to expand our learning opportunities for students. ESSER 1 is federal funds as well as the GEAR funding. Those funds have been obligated in anticipation of our return. And then our ESSER 2 funds, which we have until September 30th of 23, those funds we are anticipating, we've spent about half of that. A lot of that has to do with, that's the pot of money we're using now to prepare for the school year. We've added additional teachers for our independent study to handle the K-8 or the TK-12 model. And then our ESSER 3 funds, which is the largest pot of money and goes all the way through September 30th of 2024, we've not expended those yet, and we'll have some parent meetings to talk to parents about what the children's needs are and how we can use those funds to help out. Next slide. I wanted to talk a little bit about how we use the COVID funds for student and staff safety. We do have professional grade air purifiers in all our classrooms, our offices, and our meeting spaces. These include 3 filters, 2 of which are HEPA filters, and they do clean the air 5 times per hour in each of those areas. We've upgraded all our air filters in our air conditioning units, and they are going to be changed every 3 months. We have a maintenance agreement with an outside vendor who will come in and make sure those are done every 3 months, and also make sure that the air conditioning units are up and running and in good repair. We had a comprehensive HVAC and ventilation review this past year before we started back in April, and all the repairs have been completed over the summertime that were identified that had a little longer lead time. There are some areas where they've also identified where systems need to be replaced, and those will be part of our bond program planning. And then we have hand sanitizing stations in each classroom. If a classroom does not have an actual sink in it, then they have hand sanitizer in addition to and they also have hand sanitizer in addition to the sinks. And there are also additional hand sanitizing stations throughout the school, spread throughout the school for students and staff to use prior to entering classrooms. We do have our plexiglass barriers up in our offices and our cafeterias. Teachers have workstations that have a plexiglass unit on them. And then for in the special ed classrooms, we've also provided additional for student desks if that student is unable to mask or has issues with it. For personal protective equipment, kind of known as PPE, we have masks available, we have face guards, we have gowns, we have gloves, and depending on the situation, especially in special ed, face guards may be better able to use by students, so those will be available to students. We also have the gowns and gloves for students who maybe need to be diapered, so the staff would wear that. And then we have cleaning throughout the day by our custodians. We have our restrooms are cleaned twice a day. Our high touch areas, the custodians go throughout the day and wipe down those areas, and our classrooms are also cleaned and sanitized each night. Next slide. As required by some of our funding sources, our ESSER 3 funds, we did have to put a safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of service plan up on our website, and that was posted to our website on July 23rd. So we are in compliance with that. And in September, that's when we'll be conducting our stakeholder engagement to help us develop our expenditure plan to be submitted to California Department of Education by October 29th for our ESSER 3 funds. That was the $39 million that I had talked about that we've not expended yet. And with that, I think I give it back to our moderator for questions.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all for that information. With that, we are going to move in to the Q&A. And I would like to start. I have questions in the chat, and we're receiving questions from Facebook that I did not anticipate. And then we have the questions that were submitted during registration. But I would like to start with a live question. If anyone out there would like to raise their hand, we'd call on you to ask the first question live.
Okay, our first question is from Esmeralda. Esmeralda, if you'll unmute, you can go ahead.
Good morning. Hi, I'm a parent of a special ed student entering 6th grade in a special day class. I'm also an employee for special ed. And my concern is my son is not eligible at the time to receive a vaccine because he just turned 11. And I wanted to know, like, do I need to contact someone at the district regarding if I decide to have them do independent study, or do I wait to hear from them?
So the best situation would be for you to contact the special education office or your school and ask to conduct an IEP so that individual decisions can be made for your child.
I would also say to contact the case carrier for your child too, because that's the person who will be coordinating with you in order to set up an IEP meeting. And then, like Dr. Blanco was saying, these decisions are made based on the IEP team. So the IEP team will come together to discuss the needs, to discuss if those services, how those services can be delivered, and then have a conversation about what's the appropriate settings to provide those services.
Okay, thank you, ladies. The first question from the chat then is, anything special being done for kids who are not vaccinated under 12 years old? And how many positive cases in a school will result in pivoting back to partial, in-person, or all virtual?
Sorry, there were multiple parts, so if I
Yes.
forget a part, please
The
repeat it.
first part is anything special being done for kids who are not vaccinated under 12 years old.
So we are implementing all of the mitigation strategies for all students and adults, as we've been seeing that there are breakthrough cases for even vaccinated people. So the mitigation strategies and following the health strategies are our best, line of defense against COVID. So we're going to ensure that those are occurring and really making sure that younger children, learn the practices if they need more reinforcement in those areas. What was the second part of the question? Oh, you're muted, Mrs. Bailey.
Yeah, I'm sorry. How many positive cases in a school will result in pivoting back to partial in-person or all virtual?
So at this time, that would take an act of legislation for us to be able to go back to distance learning as we knew it. That was a special legislation that expired June 30th. So when cases occur, as I mentioned, they're evaluated by the COVID safety team on site, the district COVID safety team, and the Department of Public Health of Pasadena. So in the event that a class would have to go into quarantine or certain members of the class, the lessons will be available on Canvas, our learning platform. And so our teachers are going to be using that. So it will be easy for the children to be able, not easy, but I mean, available, easily accessible for the children to be able to have access to the materials and continue learning. Now, this could change, right? Because if we recall, legislation happened very quickly when we were allowed to do the distance learning and move into the distance learning model. At this time, the two ways that we can operate and collect attendance, money that we get, ADA, is through the independent study model or through the in-person learning model. That's what we have available at this time, with the exception of children with special needs, because they have an IEP, and home instruction has always been part of the continuum of special education. So that would be, decided when those IEPs are held for individual children.
Okay, great. Thank you. One of the questions that came in during registration, how will the district/sites share information and data regarding COVID cases at school sites to parents and the community?
COVID dashboard on our website, and it's updated on a weekly basis, and we'll continue to have that dashboard and update information. If there were cases where outbreaks occurred in the school, and it is really based on who's involved, how the flow of communication is sent out, and that's decided by our health director and our HR department. So whenever anyone is exposed, they receive a letter and giving them the next steps or instructions within the required timelines.
Okay, thank you. And then a question from the Facebook live stream. How will parents be able to see these additional dollars impact their child's school site? And I believe that's based on the information that Dr. Barnes provided.
That's right.
I think most of the funds will be used in the academic area, but you will see a lot of the funds used, like I said, you'll see, plexiglass, you'll have the availability of the PPE. You'll also physically see the air purifiers. So that's why I pointed those out, because those are the non-academic expenditures for that. So that is really where you would see it. I guess also the additional resources through the social emotional, I don't know what, Helen, what the name of that was. It was it's on the website. So there's additional services, and then also there may be additional staff too as well to help with students and their progress. And so I think that's where you can actually physically see those monies being spent.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a live question now.
Okay, our next live question comes from Lucian Hyo. So when you're ready, Lucian, go ahead, unmute and ask your question.
Hi, in fact, this is Lucien's husband, Simon.
Oh,
But
sorry.
the question I'd like to ask on her behalf is that our son is in the DLIP program, and would like to know what accommodation is going to be made for DLIP in the independent study program. In addition to that, we have tried and failed miserably to make an appointment to have a discussion about this, but the phone number that was given out, it transpires, was the phone number for the Pasadena courthouse. And so all you get is a very irritated woman who is fed up fielding phone calls about independent study.
I can check into the phone number situation, but last week we did check the phone number, and it was the phone number to our Center for Independent Study. Prior to that, the phone number was going to our hotline. So we received 150 calls on the hotline, and we returned them all in the same day. So I guess I will, if you like to email me separately, I can try to see what's happening with the number that you have. There will be 3 informational meetings held on Monday regarding independent study. Independent study has some unique requirements where we have to meet with the parents individually. And so we're having the informational meetings to give general information. And then the master agreement and plan is determined with the parent. So based on the number of DLIP families that we have interested that come to the meetings is how we will design the program for every individual child, including children in a dual language immersion program. What I think in our survey with principals, we found was there were about 10 families that had an interest in participating in that model. We did present at the last board meeting, which is recorded, that explains some of the differences in the requirements and some of the challenges we have with replicating models that are designed to be in person, because we don't have the availability at this time to offer what we offered last spring, because that legislation has ended. So we fully want every family to understand what independent study means and what it doesn't mean. We're not going to exclude any family that's enrolled in any of our programs, but we have to handle it on an individual case by case because that's the way the program and law is designed.
Okay, thank you for that. From the chat, how will lunch be handled for elementary? And how will physical distancing be done?
So we'll be returning to a hot lunch model. I know happy to say, because I don't know if the kids are a little tired of the grab and go meals, but we will be having a serving line through the cafeteria. There'll be multiple lunch schedules that will allow us to have physical distancing between the students within the cafeteria, and then also whenever available, we'll be having the students eat outside as well, so that we don't have kids in the cafeteria, too many kids at one time. So that's what we're planning for lunches. And there will be, in the serving line, there will be plexiglass between the server and the students at the same time.
Okay, in registration, there are a few questions related to lunch. Can kids bring their own meals from home?
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay. From Facebook live stream, are they planning to discuss COVID precautions at school for the kids who are largely not vaccinated? And how will they be handling the lunch hour? So I know you just talked about the lunch hour, but if you could really address the first part of the question. Are they planning to discuss COVID precautions at school for the kids who are largely not vaccinated?
So the precautions that we have for the elementary schools will be the hand sanitizing stations. Students will be required to wear masks. And as much as possible, we won't do, students won't be placed on carpets as much as we can keep that from happening because they tend to scoot closer together. So mainly just separation of the desks as much as we can within the classroom if we don't have that carpet area. For a lot of the lower elementary grades, that allows us to space the desks also. So that's really the main thing we'll be doing for, and then also additional cleaning and those types of things. So that's the plan for the elementary. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add.
The COVID safety plan is posted on our website, the Return to School Safely. It's called, I believe, version 6 at this time. And any detailed information that you would like to learn about mitigation strategies is listed in the plan. That's the plan that we're required to have to be able to reopen.
Okay, we'll take a live question now.
Okay, our next live question comes from Grant. Grant, when you're ready, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, so our kids go to the Altadena Arts Magnet, and part of the reason why we love that school so much and why we want to be there is because it is an art school, right, compared to, standard education, I guess. And so we're really concerned that part of us, we have about a week or so left until school starts, and we are still struggling really bad with the idea of going to independent study or going back in person. I know the kids want to be in person. I know they did all online last year and it was a struggle for them. But the same token, we were still connected with the school. We still had arts that we were doing from home. And we have a great concern of if we go to this independent study model, we don't have that same connection that we had with the school. We're not going to be in the classroom. We're not going to be with those students just at a safer distance. So I guess the question really is how, I see this continuity of learning and that it seems to be an option for quarantining, but what is it for, like, when we have this kind of specialty type school, what is it that our students are going to be going through with the independent study that's so different, or is there a way to still have us connected with our school? Because that is what's so important to us. That is that base that those kids have. So, how do we keep that connection doing independent study or, going to, I don't know, our brains are fried right now because we keep going back and forth, and this is such a struggle for us because we want to keep our kids healthy. They have immune deficiencies, but they also want to be in that school. They want to be a part of it. So what do we do as a family? I mean, what is there to be done?
So, the independent study model is created really for children who cannot return to school due to health risk. And it's not going to be able to replicate what we have at our schools. The design that has been around for a very long time does not lend itself to that. There is recent legislation that requires us to have synchronous, opportunities with teachers that are really necessary for core instruction, graduation requirements, basic education. The principal is looking at adding some arts opportunities into the program because we know that students, struggled online, and this is even less interaction with the teacher than you experienced last year. Even the best requirements, if we go to the highest standards, which is our intent, is going to be less interaction with adults than you had last year. And again, this is driven by legislation, not necessarily what we would want to do, or you know, even if we wanted to go back to those kind of models, we have our labor agreements which have expired, and we would have to renegotiate them with our teachers. So I know that it's asking a lot of parents to trust us with the mitigation strategies, particularly with the, you know, uprise in cases, and the best opportunities are going to be in in-person learning. And if your child is healthy and able to come to school, we're strongly encouraging children to come to school. I know that is not the case with every child. Just want to be clear that we're not going to be able to create an alternative model of distance learning that we had in place last year at this time. So if you think back to last year, we all planned on returning. Everybody that's on this panel was geared to open school, and that quickly changed, you know, in a few days. So I'm giving you the best information that we have at this time, but there could be something that occurs, you know, with the disease that forces legislation to make changes quickly again. But for right now, our launch for in-person learning is going to happen on August, you know, 12th, when children are going to return to school, and we're going to provide independent study for those who cannot, and it will not be replicable of what the experience in-person learning has to offer.
Okay, thank you for that. How will independent study support DLIP? If no independent study DLIP support, how are DLIP students expected to successfully reintegrate? Will DLIP students get the same language lesson plans via Canvas that their fellow in-class DLIP students are receiving, even if their DLIP teacher is not providing synchronous time?
I do believe that I already answered the question about if you're a DLIP parent to, you know, come to an informational meeting, sit down with a teacher. We can talk about, you know, the master agreement and what it could contain for support for DLIP parents. You know, we are exploring with our curriculum and instruction department, depending on the number of children in need of this service, what it might look like. One example could be being taught in English for your core curriculum and then receiving DLIP support depending upon the language. It could be small group instruction by a teacher of the target language. It really depends on the number of children that need this support based on, you know, unique health needs.
Thank you. From registration, are masks optional outdoors, and will a mask policy be mandated?
At this time, we are mandating a mask policy. In our handbook, it said that students would not have to wear masks outdoors. Last week, we received new information from the health department strongly urging us to have students wear their masks outdoors too. I'm not sure if that change has gone up on the website. I'll check today and be sure that any changes are posted, you know, as quickly as possible. The ideal was a few weeks ago when we were writing the plan that students could have their masks outdoors, because we know that it was challenging for children to play and, you know, have the masks on with the heat. But in our last conversations with Dr. Go, it was suggested, unless, you know, we can really monitor physical distancing, that children should keep their masks on, and we'll do our best to monitor, but they are children. So keeping their masks on appears to be the safest approach at this time.
Okay, we'll take a live question now.
Okay, our next live question comes from Carly and Toya. Carly, when you're ready, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. This is actually Tutul, Carly's husband, and I just want to thank everyone for having this session for us to get some more questions answered. And Helen, want to give you a big shout out for the assistant soup title. Give you a big high five when I see you. So my question is a clarification question, and it's kind of piggybacking off of, I think it was Greg about the virtual. I'm sorry, Grant, about the virtual option. And are we saying that legislation is keeping us from having a virtual option for parents, and not like widespread, but those parents like Grant and myself, who's my wife is actually thinking about deciding whether we're going to send our son back to school, because of the concerns, and wondering if the virtual option is not an option because of legislation. I mean, what are your thoughts around that?
So the virtual option as we knew it in distance learning model with the cameras and synchronous instruction and having every teacher present that way is not an option at this time. Our independent study teachers, depending on the age of the child, will be providing virtual education. What's different is about the scheduling and the requirements for independent study, which could be as little as an hour a day of synchronous with you seeing your teacher like the way we're seeing each other. There are other requirements for live interactions, which could be through email, phone calls, video conferencing, or having the work on Canvas. So what the legislators gave us was a model that was designed for alternative education for children who needed education in a different way, and said, this is what you can use for everyone who does not want to return to school. I presented with Mr. Torres at the last board meeting, and we're working hard to go beyond what the legislation's minimum requirements are, but it will not be the hybrid model. So I hope that clarifies the question.
Okay, thank you all. We only have a couple of minutes left, and I need to end Q&A because we have closing remarks that need to happen. I really want to thank you all for attending. If I apologize to those of you with your raised hands, if you could type your questions in the chat, we'll be sure to include them in the written responses that will be provided to you on a later date, but as soon as possible. And I thank you all for your participation. I thank the panelists from PUSD for taking the time out of I know you're all still working on the opening, but taking time out to prepare for this and to participate this morning. And so with that said, Katie, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll echo Michelle's thanks to all of our panelists. Thank you so much to all of you for being here. And yes, if you're in the chat, make sure you get your questions in there. We will collect all of them. Similarly, if you're joining us on Facebook on our live stream, please go ahead, type your questions there. As you'll see from the responses, we do have a lot of similar questions, and we will do our best to get some written responses out to everybody. With that, I'd just like to thank all of our partners who made this event possible. Of course, our partners at PUSD, as well as women in the NAACP and the Eta Lambda mega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority. If you'd like more information about what we do at NWPC, we work to recruit, train, and elect women to local office in the greater Pasadena area. That's Pasadena, Altadena, Glendale, Sierra Madre, and La Cañada. You can find us online at nwpcgpa.org, or you can just reply to any of those emails we've sent you. Obviously, all the information for PUSD, including that updated version 6 safety plan and contact information for everybody you heard from today, is online at pusd.us. So With that, my thanks to all of you for being here today. I know that this is a really challenging time and there are a lot of unanswered questions, and everybody is doing their best to keep all of our students and teachers and staff and families safe. So thank you so much for being part of this conversation, and we hope that you all have a terrific start to this year's school year. Until we see you next time, thanks so much.